The designer underwear on my penthouse floor wasn't my wife's size. I stood there in my bespoke Oxfords, still covered in drywall dust from the Cherry Hills job, staring at the black lace thong crumpled next to our marble vanity. Victoria wore size small. This was extra small and definitely not the practical silk briefs she preferred for her 12-hour days at the corporate firm. "Vance, are you ready yet?" Victoria's voice cut through the penthouse like a blade. "We're already 20 minutes late for the partners' dinner." I picked up the underwear with 2 fingers, examining it like evidence, which I suppose it was. The fabric was expensive, silk and French lace, the kind of thing that costs more than I made in a day, flipping commercial properties and zoning plots around our booming Denver metropolis. "Coming, honey," I called back, my voice steady despite the churning in my gut. I walked downstairs to find Victoria checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. At 38, she was still stunning. Auburn hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, emerald dress that hugged her curves, diamond earrings catching the light. She looked like she belonged in the pages of a legal magazine. I looked like I belonged on a dusty construction site. "Jesus, Vance, really?" She turned to face me, her green eyes cold with disappointment. "That's what you're wearing?" I glanced down at my dark denim and button-down shirt, the same outfit I wore to every firm function. "What's wrong with this?" "Nothing. Thing if we were going to a casual chain bistro." She grabbed her designer purse from the console table. "Never mind. We're late enough as it is." A car horn honked outside, long impatient blast that made our neighbor's dogs bark. "That's Preston," Victoria said, not meeting my eyes. "He offered to drive since his car has GPS. Preston Blake, Victoria's law partner, her mentor's golden boy, the guy who drove a Bentley and wore suits that cost more than my monthly country club dues. The guy whose business card I'd found in Victoria's jacket pocket last month, with a phone number written on the back in her handwriting. "I can drive us," I said. "The Defender's running fine." Victoria's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass in that rust bucket. "Vance, these are important people, partners, judges. The mayor will be there." She softened her tone, but the damage was already done. "Look, I know you don't understand the legal world, but appearances matter. Preston's doing us a favor." The horn honked again. Through the window, I could see Preston's black Bentley idling in our driveway, exhaust visible in the cold October air. "Go ahead," I said. "I'll catch up. Don't be ridiculous." "Get in the car," but I was already walking toward the kitchen, forgot my phone. "You go. I'll take the Defender and meet you there." Victoria hesitated, checking her watch. "Fine, but don't embarrass me, okay? And for God's sake, don't tell any of your real estate stories." The front door slammed behind her. Through the kitchen window, I watched her slide into Preston's passenger seat, saw him lean over to say something that made her laugh. Really laugh in a way she hadn't laughed with me in months. I pulled the black underwear from my pocket and laid it on the imported quartzite countertop Victoria had insisted we install last year. $150,000 for a kitchen renovation, she'd said, an investment in our future. Now I wondered whose future she'd really been thinking about. My phone buzzed with a text from my buddy Sterling at the club. "Squash match tomorrow. You need to hit something." If only he knew how right he was. I grabbed a scotch from the fridge and sat at the breakfast bar, staring at the evidence. The smart thing would be to confront Victoria directly, ask her whose underwear this was, demand the truth. But I'd learned something in 15 years of marriage. The truth was rarely as satisfying as people claimed it would be. Besides, I had a better idea. My phone was an older secure model. Victoria was always nagging me to upgrade, but it had a decent camera. I took several photos of the underwear, making sure to capture the expensive label. Then I opened Victoria's MacBook, which she'd left on the kitchen counter. She never changed her passwords. Still used our anniversary date for everything, which would have been romantic if it weren't so careless. Her email loaded quickly, and I scrolled through the usual work correspondence, client updates, board meeting requests. Then I found them. The emails were buried in a folder labeled personal, mixed in with messages from her sister and reminders about exclusive spa appointments. But there they were, dozens of exchanges with Preston Blake that had nothing to do with legal briefs or client meetings. "Can't stop thinking about yesterday afternoon. Read one from last Tuesday. Your corner office door has a very good lock." "Dinner with Vance tonight," Victoria replied. "Wish it was with you instead. He's been so distant lately." Distant, I nearly laughed out loud. I'd been working 60-hour weeks trying to keep my commercial acquisitions firm afloat while she climbed the ladder at Carmichael and Sterling. I came home exhausted, covered in drywall dust or whatever bureaucratic red tape had tried to defeat me that day, and she'd be on the velvet couch with case files barely looking up when I walked in. But I wasn't the one being distant, apparently. I scrolled further back, finding the smoking gun in an email from 3 weeks ago, the Brown Palace Hotel, Suite 412, Thursday at 3 p.m., where the black set I bought you. The black set? I looked at the underwear on the counter, feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. My phone rang, Victoria calling. "Where are you?" she asked without preamble. "People are asking." "On my way," I lied, closing the laptop. "Denver traffic." "Well, hurry up, and Vance, please try to be, I don't know, charming. These people could refer high net worth clients to you." The line went dead. I finished my scotch and looked around our designer kitchen, our quartzite counters, our imported stainless steel appliances, our perfect high society suburban life that was apparently built on lies and expensive lingerie. I'd always been good with property, good at acquiring assets that were undervalued, but some things, once you discovered how badly they were damaged, weren't worth acquiring. They were worth something else entirely. The senior partners' dinner was exactly what I'd expected. A room full of elite people in bespoke clothes talking about offshore accounts while eating expensive culinary foam they'd barely touch. I arrived 40 minutes late, parking my customized Defender between a Mercedes Maybach and a Lexus like a matte black middle finger pointed at the Denver legal establishment. Victoria was holding court at a VIP corner table, gesturing animatedly while Preston and two other senior partners hung on her every word. She looked radiant, alive in a way I rarely saw at home. When she spotted me threading through the silk-draped tables, her smile flickered for just a moment. "Vance?" She stood and kissed my cheek, her lips barely making contact. "Everyone, this is my husband, Vance. He's in real estate." "Commercial developer, actually," I corrected, settling into the plush, empty chair beside her. The correction earned me a sharp look. "Same thing," Preston said with a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "He was younger than me by at least 5 years, with the kind of carefully maintained, arrogant good looks that suggested private personal trainers and expensive skincare products." "Must be nice working with your hands all day." "Very authentic." The way he said authentic made it sound like a quaint blue-collar hobby, like collecting stamps or digging ditches. "It has its rewards," I said. "You'd be surprised what you can learn about elite people when you're reviewing their property titles." Victoria's hand found my knee under the table, her manicured nails digging in slightly. A warning. Judge Eleanor Carmichael, the firm's ruthless founding partner, leaned forward with predatory interest. "Oh, do tell." "Well," I said, warming to the subject, "just last week I was auditing a property deed for this high-asset divorce attorney. Not anyone here, of course. And I found a hidden offshore shell company attached to the estate. Turned out it wasn't his." The table fell, dead silent. Victoria's nails dug deeper into my flesh. "How incredibly interesting," Judge Carmichael said finally. "I imagine you see all sorts of hidden domestic situations in your line of work. You could say that. Amazing what powerful people think you don't notice when you're just the guy managing dirt." Preston cleared his throat loudly. "Speaking of domestic situations, Victoria was just telling us about your penthouse kitchen renovation. $150,000 for new imported counters, wasn't it? That's quite a capital investment for a developer." The emphasis on developer was subtle, but unmistakable. So was the elitist implication. How does a guy who deals with dirt afford luxury quartzite countertops? "Victoria handles our liquid finances," I said. "I just acquire the dirt when the market breaks." "And it breaks often, I imagine," Preston continued with a smirk. "Old markets, old money, old everything." "Some assets are worth maintaining," I replied, staring dead into his eyes. "Others are better off liquidated entirely." Victoria stood abruptly. "I need some air, Vance. Would you walk with me?" Outside, the October Denver night was crisp and biting. Victoria's breath formed small clouds as she turned to face me, her polished composure finally cracking. "What the hell was that?" she hissed. "Offshore shell companies and property deeds." "Really?" It was a true story. It was socially embarrassing. "These elite people are my corporate colleagues, Vance. My entire future depends on what they think of me. And what do they think of you?" She paused, studying my face in the dim glow of the gas streetlight. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just wondering if your high-stakes future includes me, or if I'm just another underperforming asset that needs liquidating." For a moment, something flickered in her sharp green eyes. Guilt, maybe, or calculating fear. Then her corporate lawyer mask slipped flawlessly back into place. "You're being paranoid and incredibly dramatic." "Am I?" "Yes. And if you can't handle being around highly successful people without acting like some kind of self-made maverick, then maybe you should just go home to your blueprints." Maybe I should. I turned to walk away toward the valet, but her voice stopped me. "Vance, wait." When I looked back, she was hugging her emerald designer wrap against the mountain cold. "I'm sorry. I know tonight is socially hard for you. Being around all these elite corporate lawyers and federal judges, feeling like you don't fit in. I don't fit in. You could if you wanted to." She stepped closer, heels clicking on the cobblestone. "There's nothing inherently wrong with what you do, but don't you ever want more? Don't you ever get tired of managing other people's properties? Every single day?" I said, and I meant it. She smiled then. The first genuine smile she'd given me all evening. "Good, because I've been thinking we should seriously talk about your future." "About us? What about us?" "Not here." When we get back to the penthouse, she glanced back toward the country club terrace. "I should get back inside, network a little more with the partners. Can you catch a ride with someone?" "I drove my own vintage vehicle, remember? Right, the Defender." She wrinkled her perfectly contoured nose. "Oh well, drive carefully. I'll probably be late. You know how these high-stakes networking things go." I watched her walk back inside, her designer heels clicking on the pavement. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, I saw Preston stand instantly as she approached the VIP table, pulling out her chair with exaggerated, arrogant gallantry. I sat in my Defender for a long time, heavy engine running, heat blasting. Around me, the expensive luxury cars gleamed under the club lights like sleeping predators. I thought about Victoria's words. "Don't you ever get tired of managing other people's properties?" The thing was, I'd gotten very good at identifying toxic assets. And lately, the biggest catastrophic liability in my life was my high society marriage. My secure phone buzzed with an encrypted text from an unknown number. "Your wife is screwing my husband." I stared at the glowing screen, reading the lethal message 3 times before it sank in. Another text followed immediately. "The Brown Palace Hotel, Suite 412, right now." Preston was married. I'd forgotten that minor detail in the corporate brochure, or maybe I'd never actively known it, but apparently his high-profile wife had analytically figured out what mine was up to. I put the heavy Defender in drive and headed toward the downtown hotel. The Brown Palace Hotel was the kind of historic luxury place Victoria and I used to frequent after spending our date nights at Cream of Coffee House back when we still celebrated anniversaries. 5 stars marble lobby, exclusive valet parking. I parked in a shadowy alley across the street and called the encrypted number that had texted me. "Who is this?" I asked when a sharp woman answered. "Someone who's as tired of being lied to as you probably are." Her voice was icy, steady, ruthlessly controlled. "I am in the gritty downtown parking garage. Come to level 4. I have the files. How did you get my secure number? Your wife's not as digitally careful as she thinks she is. Neither is my arrogant husband. I found her in the dimly lit concrete cavern of the downtown parking garage, leaning against a sleek executive sedan. She was fiercely attractive in a sharp, intimidating way, sleek blonde hair, an impeccably tailored designer suit, the kind of ruthless woman who commanded boardrooms. "You must be Vance," she said, as my boots echoed on the concrete. "I'm Genevieve Blake, Preston's wife. How long have you known about them?" 3 months. About you, about an hour." She crossed her arms, her eyes scanning the empty garage shadows. Offshore shell companies and hotel bills on the corporate expense account. Exceedingly sloppy. Why didn't you confront them directly? Genevieve laughed, a sharp sound that echoed off the concrete, but there was zero humor in it. "Because I'm not some emotionally scorned wife in a daytime soap opera. I'm a senior corporate auditor, and I strictly believe in gathering insurmountable evidence before I execute my hostile takeover. She slid a thick, heavily sealed manila envelope across the sleek hood of her sedan. Forensic financial audits, downloaded iCloud backups, hotel security records, specific prenuptial agreement loopholes they tried to bypass, everything you desperately need for a very lucrative and utterly devastating divorce settlement. I opened the heavy envelope, scanning the lethal contents under the flickering fluorescent light. There were dozens of high-resolution photos, Victoria and Preston entering the luxury hotel, leaving the private suites, kissing aggressively in the VIP parking garage. The encrypted timestamp showed they'd been meeting here twice a week for agonizing months. "What do you want from me?" I asked, staring at my wife's betrayal documented in high definition. "Nothing at all." Considered a ruthless, professional courtesy. One betrayed high net worth spouse to another. "What about your husband?" Genevieve's perfectly painted smile was cold enough to frost the concrete walls. Preston's about to brutally discover that his wife is also a very unforgiving corporate auditor. And unlike your Victoria, I actually wrote the ironclad fine print in our prenuptial agreement. She stood up straight, unlocking her sedan with a sharp chirp. "Good luck, Vance. And always remember, the best revenge isn't getting mad. It's getting absolutely everything." I sat in my Defender for another hour, studying the forensic financial audit, memorizing the meticulous timeline of my wife's corporate and romantic betrayal. The evidence was overwhelming, financially devastating, and absolutely enough to systematically destroy Victoria's elite legal career along with our high-stakes marriage. But as I drove home through the empty Denver streets, I realized I didn't want a standard lucrative divorce settlement. I didn't want half of our luxury assets or alimony or any of the usual high society consolation prizes. I wanted something much more psychologically satisfying. I wanted to watch Victoria's perfect, arrogant world crumble to dust, piece by carefully orchestrated piece, and I knew exactly which corporate structures to dismantle first. The next morning, Victoria was gone before I woke up. Not unusual, but the type note on the kitchen island was, "Emergency corporate client meeting. Home late, don't wait up." I made a dark espresso and opened her MacBook Pro again, scrolling through her encrypted emails until I found exactly what I was hunting for. A secure message to Preston from yesterday evening, sent while I was driving back from the downtown garage. "Vance seems suspicious tonight. We need to be much more digitally careful." Preston's reply was swift and arrogant. "Maybe it's time to just tell the developer. This sneaking around the country club is getting old. Not yet. I need to strategically handle this my way. Give me one more month to finalize the asset transfers. Another month." I wondered what legal maneuvers Victoria was planning. Probably building a fabricated case for a hostile divorce, positioning herself as the emotionally wronged party somehow. She was historically good at that, rewriting legal history to flawlessly suit her narrative. But I had tactical advantages she didn't know about. 15 years of marriage had taught me her psychological patterns, her hidden weaknesses, her deepest fears, and my real estate job had taught me how to be completely invisible, how to move through the hidden frameworks of people's property portfolios without being noticed. It was time to put those analytical skills to work. My first stop was the Denver Athletic Club, an exclusive high-rise facility downtown where I'd been playing squash since college. Sterling ran the private courts, 65 years old, built like a concrete pillar with a mind that had seen more corporate backstabbing than most people saw on screen. "You look like absolute hell," he said as I adjusted my grip. "Trouble at the penthouse? You could say that? Want to talk about it?" "Not yet. Maybe later when the market settles." Sterling nodded sharply and stepped onto the court. "Then let's hit something fast instead." I spent a grueling hour pounding the rubber ball, physically working out the psychological rage and betrayal until my shoulders burned like fire and my lungs painfully ached. When I finally stopped breathing heavy, Sterling was studying me with the stoic expression of a man who'd seen plenty of high society domestic destruction over the decades. "Whatever's eating you alive," he said quietly, "don't do anything legally stupid. Federal prison orange isn't your tailored color. I'm not planning anything remotely illegal." "Good. But there's standard legal and there's ruthlessly smart, and they're not always the same damn thing. What would you do if someone completely betrayed you, publicly humiliated you, made you feel like absolute nothing?" Sterling slowly wiped his brow with a towel. depends entirely on what I wanted as the final outcome. If I wanted them legally punished, I'd call the authorities. If I wanted them permanently gone, I'd call a shark lawyer. But if I wanted them to truly understand the depth of how they made me feel, he shrugged his massive shoulders. That's much harder. That takes strategic creativity. Creativity. The best corporate raiders aren't merely the strongest or the blindingly fastest. They're the analytical ones who can think three strategic moves ahead, who can brilliantly turn their arrogant opponent's greatest asset into a fatal liability. He met my cold eyes. You're a highly intelligent guy, Vance. Much smarter than these elite people give you credit for. Weaponize that. I left the athletic club with a flawless demolition plan forming in my mind. Victoria arrogantly thought I was just the boutique developer, the property manager who bought dirt and stayed out of her elite corporate way. She'd entirely forgotten that acquiring complex assets required a deep understanding of exactly how they worked and precisely how they could be systematically leveraged. My secure phone rang as I reached my defender. Unknown encrypted number again. Vance, this is Elena Rostova. I manage the VIP lounge at 5430 Rooftop downtown. I knew the exclusive luxury place, a sleek, high-altitude lounge where the elite legal crowd gathered to scheme after work. Okay, I heard through the downtown grapevine that you might be highly interested in specific information about certain corporate lawyers who frequently occupy my VIP establishment. What kind of specific information? The kind that arrogant people carelessly share when they've had far too many signature cocktails and think the invisible bartender isn't actively listening. Meet me tonight at 10 o'clock. Come strictly alone. The secure line went dead. I sat in my defender wondering exactly how many elite people knew about Victoria's dirty affair, how many wealthy socialites had been quietly watching me play the oblivious fool while my high-powered wife screwed her senior business partner. That afternoon, I did something I'd never done in 15 years. I actively followed Victoria. She left her corner office at Carmichael and Sterling at 4:30, driving her silver Range Rover toward the upscale Cherry Creek shopping district. But instead of heading to the luxury hotel, she turned into the private parking lot of an exclusive designer boutique, the kind of heavily guarded place that sold custom dresses that cost more than most people's annual salaries. I parked discreetly across the busy street and watched her through the tinted window, trying on imported clothes while a personal sales associate frantically fluttered around her. She emerged a full hour later with several heavy garment bags, looking smugly pleased with herself. Her next stop was a VIP hair salon, then a private nail spa, then a luxury lingerie boutique that made standard luxury brands look like bargain bins. By the time she finished her massive shopping spree, it was nearly 8 o'clock. She drove back to the penthouse, but only stayed long enough to shower and completely change. When she left the secured building again at 9:30, she was wearing one of the new designer dresses, black, form-fitting, dangerously expensive. She looked absolutely stunning. She also looked exactly like a woman preparing for a high-stakes romantic date. I followed her SUV to the 5430 rooftop, watching from the shadowy street as she met Preston at a secluded corner VIP table. They were carefully cautious not to touch, but their magnetic body language screamed intimate closeness. Preston kept leaning dangerously close to whisper in her ear, making her laugh that same laugh. Victoria played with her auburn hair, a nervous tell I instantly recognized from our early dating days. At exactly 10 o'clock, I went inside the sleek rooftop lounge. Elena Rostova was exactly what I'd expected from her sharp voice. Mid-30s, dark, intense hair, sharp, analytical eyes that missed absolutely nothing. She was wiping down crystal glasses behind the sleek, illuminated bar, but I could easily tell she was closely watching Victoria and Preston's VIP table in the mirrored reflection. "Vance?" she asked quietly as I approached the marble bar. "That's me. Craft bourbon. Neat." She poured a generous Macallan 18 and slid it seamlessly across the marble. "Your wife and her arrogant friend are frequent regulars. Usually come in twice a week. Always demand that exact same secluded table. Always order the exact same expensive drinks. What do they talk about? Corporate work, mostly. High asset cases, wealthy clients, vicious office politics." Elena leaned closer over the bar, lowering her voice so the ambient music covered it. But lately, it's been much more intimately personal. She's been constantly complaining about you. What kind of complaints? The usual elitist garbage. You don't understand her massive corporate ambitions. You're structurally holding her back. You're from entirely different social worlds. Elena's sharp expression softened slightly. For what it's strictly worth, she sounds like she's desperately trying to convince herself as much as him. Convince herself of what? That legally leaving you is the brilliant right thing to do. I took a long, burning pull of my bourbon, watching Victoria's reflection in the mirror. She was gesturing animatedly, telling some corporate story that had Preston utterly captivated. She looked incredibly happy, genuinely, radiantly happy, in a sickening way I hadn't seen in years. There's something else, Elena said quietly. Last week, they were talking heavily about a massive property, some luxury real estate she's been secretly looking at. Sounded like she was legally planning to purchase it outright. A house? An expensive, secluded estate in Jackson Hole, from what I could gather. She kept talking about starting totally fresh and massive new beginnings. I finished my bourbon and left a crisp $100 bill on the marble bar. Thanks for the actionable information. Vance, Elena called softly as I turned to leave the rooftop. Whatever demolition you're planning, be extremely careful. Corporate lawyers are incredibly dangerous when they're financially cornered. Outside, I sat in my dark Defender and tried to analytically process what I'd just learned. Victoria wasn't just having a dirty affair, she was actively planning to blindside and leave me. The massive shopping spree, the new designer clothes, the luxury house hunting. She was constructing a brand new high society life with Preston, and I was apparently the only oblivious idiot who didn't know it. My secure phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, working late on the merger again. Don't wait up. I looked up through the glass barrier at her VIP table, where she was now openly holding Preston's hand and smiling like a woman deeply in love. Working late, right? I drove back to the penthouse and spent the next 3 grueling hours running a forensic financial audit of our shared accounts, learning devastating things about my marriage that made my stomach violently turn. Victoria had been quietly moving money, small untraceable amounts, nothing that would automatically trigger bank alerts, but enough to massively add up over a long time. She'd opened a new offshore shell company in her maiden name only. She had been secretly paying for a private vault in Cherry Creek I didn't know existed. By the time she finally came home at 2 a.m., smelling intensely like expensive perfume and Preston's bespoke cologne, I was fully ready. How was the corporate merger? I asked from the massive kitchen island where I sat with a black espresso and a thick stack of printed financial audits. She physically jumped, clearly not expecting to find me awake in the dark. Vance, you completely scared me. Sorry, couldn't sleep, thought I'd audit some estate bills. I casually gestured at the financial papers spread across the imported quartzite. Very interesting reading. Victoria's sharp eyes flicked to the financial statements, and I saw her corporate lawyer instincts instantly kick in, rapidly calculating what I might have uncovered, planning her aggressive legal defense. What's so interesting about standard bank statements? Oh, just some luxury charges I completely didn't recognize. Private vault rental, for instance. Didn't know we needed a secure Cherry Creek storage vault. It's just some old archived files from the firm, nothing remotely important. And this offshore shell company, the one with my name conveniently not on it. Victoria sat down slowly across from me, her perfect composure visibly slipping slightly. Vance, we desperately need to talk. I completely agree. Let's start with exactly where you were tonight. I explicitly told you working at the 5430 rooftop. The color instantly drained from her perfectly made-up face. What? I said. Were you working at the 5430 rooftop? Because that's exactly where I saw you with Preston, looking very professionally intimate. Victoria was dead quiet for a long agonizing moment, staring at her manicured hands. When she finally looked up, her green eyes were ice cold and ruthless. Fine. You want the brutal truth? Here it is. I'm not happy, Vance. I haven't been remotely happy for a very long time. So, you analytically decide to screw your senior business partner. Don't be emotionally crude. What precise terminology would you prefer? Having an illicit affair? Seeing someone else? Legally cheating on your husband? I prefer falling deeply in love. The heavy words hit me like a physical blow. I'd expected corporate denial, maybe fabricated anger, possibly strategic tears. I hadn't expected her to claim actual love. How long? I asked coldly. Does it legally matter? It matters to my portfolio, Victoria. 6 months. maybe slightly longer. It started very gradually, working late on complex cases together, grabbing exclusive drinks after difficult corporate mergers. Then one night, she shrugged her shoulders. It just naturally happened. Just happened. Like a market crash, like absolute inevitability. She leaned forward over the island, and for a fleeting moment, she looked like the ambitious woman I'd married 15 years ago. Vance, we're entirely different people than we were 15 years ago. We want vastly different high-stakes things. We've completely grown apart. You've grown apart. I'm the exact same developer I always was. I know. That's the fundamental problem. The heavy words hung in the quiet air between us like toxic smoke from a massive fire that had already consumed absolutely everything worth saving. So what happens now? I asked. Now we legally figure out how to cleanly end this with dignity for both of us. Dignity? I laughed, a harsh sound, but there was zero humor in it. You screw another man for 6 months. Secretly planned to leave me, illegally hide offshore money, and now you demand dignity. I want us both to be financially happy. I was perfectly happy until I found out my high-powered wife was a corporate liar and a cheat. Victoria's flawless mask finally slipped, revealing the vicious anger boiling underneath. You were just comfortable, Vance. There's a massive difference. You were perfectly content to manage your boutique portfolio and come home to a private chef's dinner and fall asleep watching the market. But I wanted so much more. I legally deserved more, and Preston gives you more. Preston truly understands my massive corporate ambitions. He financially supports my legal career. He doesn't ever make me feel guilty for wanting massive, elite success. I never once made you feel guilty. You didn't have to. It was written all over your face every single time I worked late on a merger or attended a high society firm function or talked about making senior managing partner. Her voice rose in the cavernous kitchen. You deeply resented my elite success because it constantly highlighted your own entrepreneurial limitations. My limitations? Yes, your stubborn refusal to grow, to pivot, to become anything more than a boutique developer who buys other wealthy people's properties because he fundamentally can't build his own legacy. The vicious words were strategically designed to hurt, and they completely succeeded, but they also perfectly clarified something for me. Victoria didn't just want a standard divorce, she wanted to psychologically destroy me in the legal process to justify her betrayal by painting me as the absolute failure in our high-stakes marriage. You're entirely right, I said finally. I am very good at acquiring other people's properties, but I'm also an expert at identifying exactly what asset is broken beyond repair. What's that legally supposed to mean? I stood up, methodically gathering the forensic financial audit papers. It means you're about to brutally discover that this boutique developer learned a few technical things during 15 years of marriage, starting with exactly how to dismantle massive empires. Vance, don't do anything legally stupid. Don't worry. Absolutely everything I'm planning is perfectly legal. I headed for the grand staircase, then paused on the marble step. Oh, and Victoria, you might want to call Preston. Tell him his auditor wife knows all about the hotel. I left her sitting frozen at the kitchen island, her perfect corporate composure finally shattered into pieces, and went upstairs to engineer my revenge. I woke up the next morning to find Victoria already gone and a typed note on my nightstand. We'll talk legally tonight. Please don't do anything we'll both deeply regret. Far too late for that, I thought, crumpling the corporate note. My first encrypted call was to Genevieve Blake. She answered on the precise second ring, sounding crisp and utterly professional. Vance, I analytically wondered when I'd hear from you. Your arrogant husband knows that you know. I assumed he would inevitably. Preston's not very good at hiding his financial panic. She paused. How did Victoria take the devastating news? About as well as you'd legally expect. She's in full corporate lawyer mode now. Damage control, strategic asset planning. Good. That means she'll make massive mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind that inevitably happen when highly intelligent people arrogantly think they're much smarter than everyone else in the room. Genevieve's tone carried a sharp hint of deep satisfaction. Are you completely free for a working lunch? I have a lucrative proposition. We met at an exclusive restaurant downtown, far enough from the elite legal district to entirely avoid Victoria's corporate colleagues. Genevieve looked like she'd slept flawlessly despite confirming her husband's affair. She was wearing another impeccably tailored suit and the kind of predatory smile that made me think of great white sharks. "You're handling this remarkably well," I said, as we settled into a secure private corner booth. "I've had 3 months to psychologically process my anger, and now I'm entirely in the execution phase." Execution? Genevieve opened her designer briefcase and pulled out a thick, encrypted folder. "Preston thinks he's been financially clever, but he's left a massive digital trail of evidence that would embarrass a first-year law student. Hotel bills on the corporate credit card, personal international calls during billable hours, elite client meetings that absolutely never happened." She slid the heavy folder across the polished table. "He's been systematically embezzling from his own firm to privately finance his affair with your wife." I opened the encrypted folder and scanned the highlighted documents: corporate credit card statements, secure phone records, massive billing discrepancies. The fraudulent pattern was crystal clear once you knew exactly what to digitally look for. "This is absolute proof to get him legally disbarred," I said, "among other severe things. But here's where it gets incredibly interesting." Genevieve leaned forward over the table. "Victoria's signature is on half of these luxury receipts: hotel private rooms, exclusive dinners, lavish weekend trips. She's been illegally using firm resources too, so they're both heavily stealing. Technically, it's massive wire fraud and embezzlement. The Federal Bar Association takes a very dim view of that sort of criminal thing." I studied Genevieve's sharp face, looking for some emotional sign of the betrayed wife I'd expected to find. Instead, I saw cold analytical calculation and extreme professional satisfaction. "What exactly do you want from me?" I asked. "I want to ruthlessly coordinate our tactical efforts. You intimately know Victoria's hidden weaknesses. I know Preston's. Together, we can entirely make sure they both face devastating, appropriate consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Genevieve's predatory smile widened. "The financial kind that permanently end careers and elite reputations. The kind that makes starting over very, very difficult." We spent the next intense hour planning our offensive. Genevieve had massive resources I lacked: ruthless corporate investigators, forensic accountants, deep connections in the elite financial community. I had the one psychological thing she desperately needed: intimate structural knowledge of Victoria's habits, deep fears, and hidden vulnerabilities. "There's something else," I said as we prepared to leave the restaurant. "Victoria's been moving offshore money, renting secure private vaults, looking at massive luxury real estate. I think she's legally planning to leave town with Preston. That's my educated guess." Genevieve's expression darkened ominously over my dead body. "Preston's not going absolutely anywhere until I'm entirely finished with him." That afternoon, I drove my Defender to the private vault in Cherry Creek Victoria had been secretly paying for, a heavily guarded facility on the outskirts of downtown. The facility manager was a tech kid in his 20s who looked bored enough to be highly helpful. "I need to digitally check on my wife's secure unit," I said, showing him my elite black card and driver's license. "Victoria Caldwell, Unit 247. Sorry, man, I can only let strictly authorized users access the VIP units." I pulled out my money clip and extracted a crisp $100 bill. She sent me to immediately grab some corporate files for her law office. Massive emergency client situation. The kid looked at the cash, then at my face, then back at the cash. "You absolutely didn't hear this from me, but the secure lock code is 1015. Unit 247 was massively larger than I'd expected, filled with designer boxes, expensive antique furniture, and personal luxury items I immediately recognized from our penthouse. Victoria had been legally planning her silent exit for months, carefully removing traces of our high society life together and quietly storing them here. I opened several designer boxes, finding expensive photo albums, lavish wedding gifts, and precious mementos from our early years together. At the bottom of one heavy box, I found something that made my blood run ice cold: weaponized divorce papers already legally filled out and notarized, with a brutal property settlement that gave Victoria absolutely everything and left me with less than nothing. She'd been planning to completely blindside me, present me with a massive legal threat, and force me to unconditionally accept her terms or face a lengthy corporate legal battle I couldn't afford to fight. But buried beneath the weaponized divorce papers was something even more financially interesting: a massive real estate contract for a secluded estate in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. The primary buyers were listed as Victoria Caldwell and Preston Blake. The closing date was exactly 3 weeks away. They weren't just planning to leave their wealthy spouses, they were planning to entirely disappear together with our assets. I took high-resolution photos of absolutely everything with my secure phone, then carefully repacked the designer boxes. As I was leaving, I noticed a hidden security camera pointed directly at the vault entrance. I made a mental note to have Genevieve's ruthless corporate investigator securely get copies of the digital footage. My secure phone rang as I reached my defender. Elena from 5430 Rooftop. Vance, you need to get down here right now. Your wife and her arrogant boyfriend are having a very loud, very public meltdown. I arrived at the 5430 Rooftop to find Victoria and Preston at their usual VIP table, but the intimate, luxurious atmosphere was entirely gone. Victoria was leaning forward aggressively, speaking in the kind of harsh corporate whisper that carries farther than a shout. Preston was slumped in his plush chair, looking exactly like a man who had just learned his wife was a senior hedge fund manager with a highly vindictive streak. I took a dark seat at the marble bar where I could hear them clearly over the ambient music. I explicitly told you this would happen. Victoria was hissing. I told you Genevieve was financially suspicious. She hired a ruthless corporate investigator, Victoria. She has high-resolution photos, offshore receipts, everything. Then we strictly stick to the timeline. 3 weeks and we're gone. Gone exactly where? She's completely frozen my corporate accounts. I can't access any of our offshore money. We'll use mine. What massive money? You're married to a boutique developer. How much could you have possibly saved? Victoria's voice turned ice cold. Much more than you arrogantly think. And once the weaponized divorce is final, I'll legally have half of everything Vance and I currently own, which is what exactly? A massive mortgage on a commercial portfolio that needs liquidity, and a boutique firm. The real estate is worth millions. The boutique business has massive assets, and there's his massive portfolio. I almost laughed out loud. My liquid portfolio was heavily tied up in commercial investments. Hardly enough cash to finance a new luxury life in a Jackson Hole estate. This is completely insane, Preston said, panicking. Maybe we should just come entirely clean, get divorced properly, start over. With what? Our elite careers will be completely over once Genevieve releases those encrypted files. We'll both be permanently disbarred. So what's your brilliant solution? Victoria was dead quiet for a tense moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. We disappear tonight. Tonight? Why wait? Every single day we stay gives them more time to build their federal case against us. We take what cash we can and immediately go. Victoria, that's survival. We can start over in Jackson Hole or an island or anywhere else, but we have to go right now before they can legally stop us. I'd heard enough. I left cash on the marble bar and walked out into the cold, my analytical mind racing. Victoria wasn't just planning to legally divorce me, she was actively planning to flee the state with stolen corporate money and completely leave me to deal with the massive wreckage of her federal legal troubles. But she'd made one crucial, fatal mistake. She arrogantly thought I was still the exact same trusting husband who'd been blindly paying bills and managing portfolios while she actively dismantled our entire marriage. She had absolutely no idea what I digitally learned or who I'd been coordinating with. Most importantly, she had zero idea that I was already 3 strategic moves ahead of her. I called Genevieve from my dark defender. They're running, I said without any preamble. Tonight. Crap, how do you definitively know? I just heard them panic planning it at the 5430 Rooftop. They're terrified about what you've got on Preston, and Victoria thinks they can just disappear before we can legally stop them. Where exactly are they going? Jackson Hole? Maybe an island? They've got a luxury secluded estate under contract near the slopes. Genevieve was deadly quiet for a moment. That's actually absolutely perfect. Perfect. Flight from federal justice, crossing state lines with stolen corporate funds, massive conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Her icy voice carried the deep satisfaction of an apex predator closing in on wounded prey. The FBI takes a very dim view of high-stakes corporate fraud. The FBI? Vance, your wife and my husband have been heavily embezzling from an elite law firm for months, planning to flee the state with the massive proceeds. That's strict federal jurisdiction. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I just wanted to get psychological revenge for their cheating. I didn't want to entirely ruin their lives. They entirely ruined their own lives the exact moment they decided to steal from their wealthy clients. Genevieve's voice hardened into steel. But if you're having any second thoughts, right now is the exact time to walk away. I thought about Victoria's vicious words at the rooftop lounge, her casual, arrogant dismissal of our 15-year marriage, her calculated plan to legally take everything and leave me with absolute nothing. I thought about the weaponized divorce papers hidden in the private vault, the secret offshore shell companies, the agonizing months of lies and betrayal. No, I said finally, no second thoughts whatsoever. What do you need me to precisely do? Go back to the penthouse and act perfectly normal. Let Victoria arrogantly think she's fooled you. When she actively tries to leave, call me immediately. And then we sit back and watch their perfect high society plan violently fall apart. I drove back to the penthouse through the gathering darkness, feeling exactly like a man rapidly approaching the edge of a sheer cliff. In a few short hours, my high-stakes marriage would be permanently over, and my elite wife would be facing massive federal charges. There was absolutely no going back from what we'd strategically set in motion. But as I pulled into my secured garage and saw Victoria's silver Range Rover already there, I analytically realized I didn't want to go back. I wanted to see this complete demolition through to the end, no matter how legally ugly it got. Victoria was in the master suite when I arrived, frantically packing a designer suitcase with quick, efficient movements. She looked up sharply when I entered, her expression carefully neutral. "Going somewhere?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Just organizing some winter clothes, spring cleaning in October." She shrugged elegantly. "I'm donating some designer things to charity." I sat on the edge of the king bed and watched her pack, mentally noting which items she was frantically taking: expensive designer clothes, massive jewelry, important encrypted documents. She was desperately trying to appear casual, but there was rigid tension in every single movement. "Victoria," I said softly, "we need to talk." She paused, a silk imported blouse halfway to the designer suitcase. "About what exactly?" "About us. About what structurally happens next. I explicitly told you last night we figure out how to cleanly end this with dignity. Is that exactly what this is? Dignity?" She turned to fully face me, and for a fleeting moment I saw the ambitious woman I'd fallen deeply in love with 15 years ago. Vulnerable, legally uncertain, afraid. "Vance, I know you're incredibly angry. You have every legal right to be, but we can work this out like rational adults." "Can we?" "Yes, I've already talked to a senior lawyer about the divorce. We can split absolutely everything fairly. No vicious fighting, no public drama." "What about Preston?" Her flawless composure slipped slightly. "What about him? Are you planning to marry him?" We haven't officially discussed that, but you love him?" "Yes, more than you ever loved me." Victoria was dead quiet for a long agonizing moment. "I love him differently than I ever loved you." "How so?" "He entirely understands me. My massive ambitions, my corporate dreams. He makes me financially feel like I can be absolutely anything. And I made you feel like you structurally couldn't. You made me deeply feel guilty for wanting more than this." She arrogantly gestured around our massive designer bedroom, our comfortable high society bedroom in our massive custom penthouse. "You were perfectly content with your entrepreneurial ordinary, and you wanted me to be content too. I was completely content with you. I know, that's exactly what made it so incredibly hard." She sharply closed the designer suitcase and set it on the hardwood floor. "I'm going to stay at a luxury hotel tonight. Give us both some breathing space to deeply think." "Which hotel does it matter? The Brown Palace Hotel?" Her face went instantly pale. "Vance, Suite 412. How did you definitively know about your luxury love nest?" "Lucky, educated guess." Victoria sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, all corporate pretense finally abandoned. "How long have you explicitly known about the affair?" "A few days. About the rest of it?" "I am still actively learning." "What rest of it?" I smiled, but there was zero warmth in it. The stolen corporate money, the planned disappearance, the secluded estate in Jackson Hole. Should I go on? Victoria's corporate lawyer instincts violently kicked in, and I saw her rapidly, mentally calculating how much I definitively knew, how much I could legally prove. "You can't prove absolutely anything," she said finally. "I don't have to. Genevieve Blake has already analytically done that." Genevieve, Preston's auditor wife. Turns out she's been building a massive federal case against both of you for months. Very thorough, ruthless woman. Victoria stood up abruptly, frantically grabbing her designer suitcase. I desperately need to go, running away, getting some mountain air. Give Preston my regards. She paused at the bedroom door. Vance, whatever you arrogantly think you know, whatever Genevieve thinks she can legally prove, it's not what you think. What is it then? It's two elite people who fell deeply in love at the wrong time with the wrong people. It's massive corporate theft, Victoria. It's federal fraud. It's criminal conspiracy. It's survival. And with that, she was entirely gone, leaving me totally alone in our massive bedroom with 15 years of high society marriage scattered around me like the debris from a total structural collapse. I immediately called Genevieve. She just left the penthouse, I said. Designer suitcase and all. Absolutely perfect. My primary contact at the FBI is standing by. The FBI, I explicitly told you this is strict federal jurisdiction now. Flight from justice, interstate corporate commerce fraud. They take it very seriously. I walked to the massive window and watched Victoria's taillights entirely disappear down our private street. What happens now? Now we sit back and wait and watch their perfect elite plan turn into a perfect legal disaster. As I hung up the secure phone, I realized that I felt something I hadn't experienced in agonizing months. Complete satisfaction. Not true happiness exactly, but the deep psychological contentment that naturally came from a demolition job well done. I'd always been an expert at acquiring complex assets. Tonight, I was going to find out exactly how good I was at totally liquidating them. At 11:47 p.m., my secure phone violently rang. Unknown encrypted number. Vance. Victoria's voice was violently shaking. I desperately need your help. Where exactly are you? The downtown police precinct. And they publicly arrested Preston at the hotel. They're claiming he embezzled millions from the firm. I sat up in bed, instantly alert. What about you? They want to officially question me tomorrow. Vance, I'm terrified. I don't know what to legally do. Call a criminal lawyer. I am a corporate lawyer, but I absolutely can't represent myself in this federal mess. Her voice totally broke. Please, I know I deeply hurt you, but I desperately need help. What kind of help? Come securely get me. I don't have absolutely anyone else to call. 20 minutes later, I found Victoria sitting on the cold concrete steps of the downtown police precinct, looking smaller and more psychologically fragile than I'd seen her in years. Her perfect corporate composure was completely shattered to pieces, auburn hair disheveled, expensive makeup smeared, designer dress heavily wrinkled. Thank you for coming, she said quietly as she got into my Defender. What exactly happened? We were at the luxury hotel, frantically packing. The FBI violently kicked in the suite door at 11 o'clock. They had a federal warrant for Preston's arrest and a massive search warrant for the entire room. What did they find? Victoria was dead quiet for a long moment. Cash. Lot of untraceable cash. And encrypted documents. What kind of encrypted documents? Elite client files, fraudulent billing records, offshore bank statements. She turned to desperately look at me, her green eyes red with tears. Vance, I legally think someone has been entirely setting us up. Setting you up? The digital evidence was too neat, too perfectly organized, like someone had been strategically planning this for months. I kept my expression flawlessly neutral. Who would do that? Genevieve. It absolutely has to be Genevieve. She's been watching us, gathering financial information, waiting for the exact perfect moment to lethally strike. Why would she do that? Because she's highly vindictive. Because she wants to permanently destroy Preston for leaving her. Preston didn't leave her. He was actively cheating on her. It's the exact same thing. We drove in tense silence for a few long minutes before Victoria spoke again. Vance, I deeply need you to know something. Whatever legally happens, but whatever you think about what I did, I absolutely never meant for it to go this incredibly far. How far did you exactly mean for it to go? I arrogantly thought we could just be together quietly without publicly hurting anyone. You were actively planning to legally divorce me and disappear to Jackson Hole. Victoria's head violently snapped toward me. How do you definitively know about Jackson Hole? I know about a lot of hidden things, Victoria. The private vault, the offshore shell account, the weaponized divorce papers you had drawn up without ever telling me. You've been spying on me. I've been auditing the portfolio. There's a massive difference. She was entirely quiet for the rest of the dark drive. When we safely reached our penthouse, she made absolutely no move to get out of the Defender. What happens now? She asked. Now you actively face the federal consequences of your choices. Vance, please, I deeply know you're angry, but we can structurally work this out. I'll permanently end things with Preston. We can go to private counseling. Start over. It's entirely too late for that. Why? Because of the dirty affair. Elite people recover from affairs. Because of absolutely everything else, the lying, the stealing, the active planning to disappear, the complete lack of respect for our high society marriage or for me. Victoria started uncontrollably crying then, real agonizing tears. Not the strategic crying I'd seen her use in corporate court. I'm deeply sorry. I'm so sorry. I absolutely never wanted to ruin you, but you did ruin me, and now you're actively facing the federal consequences. The FBI agent said they might explicitly charge me as a criminal co-conspirator. I could permanently go to federal prison, Vance. I could lose absolutely everything. You already lost absolutely everything. You just don't fully realize it yet. I got out of the Defender and walked toward the private elevator. After a long moment, Victoria slowly followed. Inside, she went straight to the designer kitchen and poured herself a massive glass of imported wine. Her hands were violently shaking. I desperately need to call a high-profile criminal attorney, she said. Someone who specializes in massive federal cases. Good idea. Will you financially help me with the exorbitant legal fees? I mean, I strictly know we're getting divorced, but no, Vance, please, I'm your wife. You're my soon-to-be ex-wife who was actively planning to steal half our massive assets and permanently disappear to Jackson Hole with your lover. Victoria set down her crystal wine glass and looked at me with something rapidly approaching her old corporate determination. Fine. If that's how you want to legally play this, I'll brutally fight you in divorce court. I'll publicly claim emotional abandonment on mental cruelty, whatever it legally takes. With what lawyer? You're about to be permanently disbarred. I haven't been legally convicted of absolutely anything yet, but you inevitably will be. The absolute certainty in my voice seemed to deeply shake her. How can you be so incredibly sure? Because Genevieve Blake is extremely good at what she analytically does. And what she analytically does is permanently destroy elite people who cross her. This isn't just about Preston's dirty affair, is it? This is entirely about you wanting psychological revenge. This is entirely about justice. Justice? Victoria laughed a harsh, bitter sound. You arrogantly call ruining my elite life justice? I call it structural consequences. My secure phone rang. Genevieve, turn on channel 7, she said, without any preamble. I found the smart remote and switched the massive screen to the local Denver news. The lead broadcast story was about a massive corporate corruption investigation at Carmichael and Sterling with file drone footage of the elite law firm's offices and high-resolution photos of Preston being led away in federal handcuffs. And federal investigators have officially arrested Preston Blake, a senior partner at the prestigious law firm, on massive federal charges of embezzlement and wire fraud, the anchor was saying. Anonymous sources close to the massive investigation say Blake may have stolen as much as $2 million in elite client funds over the past year. Victoria's crystal wine glass violently slipped from her hand, completely shattering on the imported quartzite floor. The federal investigation is ongoing, the anchor seamlessly continued. And federal prosecutors explicitly say additional high-profile arrests are expected. Victoria turned to me, her face dead white with absolute shock. $2 million? Vance, I swear to you, I absolutely didn't know it was that massive amount. How much did you arrogantly think it was? I don't know, a few $100,000 maybe. Lavish dinners, luxury hotel suites, small things. Small things absolutely don't add up to $2 million. I never actively saw the bulk of the money. Preston handled absolutely all the offshore finances for what we were secretly doing, but you completely knew he was heavily stealing. Victoria was dead quiet for a long agonizing moment. I suspected, but I absolutely didn't want to legally know for sure, because actively knowing would have legally made you complicit, because actively knowing would have meant facing the brutal truth about what we were legally doing. I turned off the massive television and deeply looked at my wife. Really deeply looked at her, maybe for the exact first time in agonizing months. She looked completely exhausted, totally defeated, and very small, sitting in our massive, expensive kitchen, totally surrounded by the complete debris of her shattered high society life. Victoria, I said very quietly, I want you to explicitly understand something. This isn't absolutely happening because I'm vindictive or cruel. This is structurally happening because you made conscious choices, dozens of them over months, that inevitably led directly to this moment. I know. Do you? Because 5 short minutes ago, you were violently blaming Genevieve, blaming me, blaming absolutely everyone except yourself. I deeply know I made massive mistakes. You made conscious choices. There's a massive difference. Victoria slowly stood up and carefully stepped entirely around the broken crystal glass. I should pack some things. I'll desperately need to find somewhere to quietly stay while this gets legally sorted out. The private vault? She gave me a very sharp look. What? You've got designer furniture there. Personal luxury items. Might be more comfortable than a cheap hotel. You know all about the private vault. I know about absolutely everything, Victoria. The structural question is, what are you going to do about it? She deeply studied my face, and I saw the exact moment when she finally realized how completely she'd been tactically outmaneuvered. You've been actively planning this, she said very slowly. This whole confrontation, this whole evening, you explicitly knew exactly what was going to happen. I analytically knew what you'd been secretly planning. I just strategically made sure it didn't work out the exact way you expected. You and Genevieve, two analytical people who got totally tired of being lied to. Victoria nodded very slowly, as if finally fully understanding the massive scope of what had structurally happened to her elite life. How long do I legally have? Before what? Before they publicly arrest me? I don't absolutely know. That's entirely up to the FBI. She went slowly upstairs to frantically pack, and I cleaned up the broken crystal glass. When she came back down 20 agonizing minutes later, she was carrying a single designer suitcase and her encrypted laptop bag. Vance, she said as she reached the grand front door, for what it's strictly worth, I did deeply love you. Maybe not the exact way you structurally deserved, but I did love you. I know, and I am deeply sorry for all of it. I know that too. She opened the heavy door, then paused. What will you do now? Acquire assets. It's exactly what I'm an expert at. Will you be completely okay? I looked around our designer kitchen, our quartzite counters, our imported stainless steel appliances, our perfect high society suburban life that had been entirely built on lies and expensive lingerie. Tomorrow, I'd start the complex process of completely rebuilding, of figuring out what my life structurally looked like entirely without Victoria in it. I'll be fine, I said, much better than fine. Victoria slowly nodded and walked out into the cold night. I watched her SUV taillights entirely disappear down our private street for the exact second time that day, but this time I completely knew she absolutely wouldn't be coming back. My secure phone rang again. Genevieve, how are you holding up? She asked. Better than expected. What exactly about Preston sitting in federal lockup, probably realizing that his elite law career is entirely over and his wife is a very good corporate saboteur with a ruthless talent for revenge, and Victoria, they'll publicly arrest her tomorrow morning. The digital evidence is utterly overwhelming. I sat down at my massive kitchen table, totally surrounded by the forensic financial audits and weaponized legal documents that had initiated this whole chain of catastrophic events. Genevieve, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you deeply feel bad about what we structurally did? She was entirely quiet for a long moment. I feel bad that it was completely necessary, but I absolutely don't feel bad about executing it. Neither do I. Good, because they absolutely would have destroyed us both if we'd allowed them. After I securely hung up, I sat in my massive kitchen for a long time, deeply thinking about the last few chaotic days and absolutely everything that had structurally led to this exact moment. Victoria was absolutely right about one thing. I was very good at acquiring other wealthy people's properties, but for the exact first time in agonizing years, I'd completely audited one of my own massive liabilities too, and it deeply felt much better than I'd expected. At 6 a.m., I was violently awakened by heavy pounding on my custom front door. Through the security window, I could see FBI agents in dark windbreakers and local police vehicles completely lining my private street. I got dressed very quickly and went downstairs. Agent Marcus Thorne was standing on my grand porch with a massive federal warrant and a very serious expression. Mr. Caldwell, We urgently need to aggressively search your penthouse for what? Digital evidence related to the Carmichael and Sterling investigation. May we securely come in? I stepped aside and calmly let them enter. For the next 3 hours, federal agents methodically went through every single room in my massive penthouse, looking for encrypted documents, hidden cash, absolutely anything that might digitally connect me to the elite law firm's missing millions. They absolutely found nothing, of course, because there was entirely nothing to find. Agent Thorne found me in the massive kitchen, drinking a dark espresso and silently watching his team deeply work. Your wife absolutely wasn't here last night, he said. No, she's quietly staying elsewhere while we legally work out our complex divorce. Do you know exactly where? A luxury hotel, I logically think. Maybe with wealthy friends. Agent Thorne deeply studied my face. Mr. Caldwell, are you explicitly aware that your wife is heavily suspected of actively participating in a massive scheme to completely defraud Carmichael and Sterling? I heavily suspected she was having a dirty affair. I absolutely didn't know about any massive financial crimes. When did you exactly first suspect the affair? A few days ago, I found some hidden things. Analytically put two and two together, what kind of hidden things? I calmly told him about the expensive underwear, the intercepted text chains, the luxury hotel receipts. Agent Thorne took meticulous notes, his expression carefully neutral. Mr. Caldwell, I urgently have to officially ask, did you have absolutely any involvement in your wife's fraudulent activities at the elite law firm? I'm a real estate developer, Agent Thorne. I acquire commercial properties and manage portfolios. I absolutely don't know anything about high-level corporate law or offshore firm accounts. But you were married to someone who absolutely does. I was married to someone who constantly lied to me for months. There's a massive structural difference. Agent Thorne sharply closed his leather notebook. We may have more intense questions later. I'll absolutely be right here. After the FBI team left, I explicitly delegated my scheduled commercial acquisitions and spent the quiet day putting my massive penthouse back together. The federal agents had been entirely thorough but respectful, and the physical damage was extremely minimal. At 3:00 p.m., the local Denver News ran a massive follow-up story about the Carmichael and Sterling federal investigation. Victoria's mugshot photo abruptly flashed on the massive screen. She looked incredibly tired and deeply scared, absolutely nothing like the confident elite attorney who'd left our massive penthouse the exact night before. Victoria Caldwell, also a senior partner at the elite firm, was officially arrested this morning on massive federal charges of criminal conspiracy and wire fraud. The reporter said both Caldwell and Blake are currently being held without bond pending a federal bail hearing scheduled for early tomorrow. I completely turned off the massive television and sat in my very quiet penthouse, deeply processing the absolute fact that my high-powered wife was in federal custody and my high society marriage was effectively over. My secure phone rang. Elena from 5430 Rooftop. Vance, I just saw the news. Are you completely okay? I'm entirely fine. Do you need absolutely anything? Good company, expensive food, someone to talk to? Actually, yeah, good company would be extremely good. Elena arrived an hour later with high-end takeout and an expensive bottle of craft bourbon. We quietly ate in my designer kitchen and talked about absolutely everything except Victoria and Preston and massive federal investigations. What will you structurally do now? Elena asked as we entirely finished dinner. Start completely over, I guess. Analytically figure out what my structural life looks like as a single independent man. Any deep regrets? I analytically thought about the deep question seriously. About the high-stakes marriage ending? No. About exactly how it ended? Sometimes you did exactly what you absolutely had to do. I did exactly what I explicitly chose to do. There's a massive structural difference. Elena smiled warmly. Sounds exactly like something a very wise man would definitively say, or a developer who's definitively learned the complete difference between structurally acquiring assets and entirely liquidating them. We quietly talked until very late, and when Elena finally left, I felt something I absolutely hadn't experienced in agonizing months. Deep peace, not true happiness exactly, but the solid calm that comes directly after a massive storm has entirely passed, and you're structurally still completely standing. The next morning, I calmly drove my defender to the downtown federal courthouse for Victoria and Preston's bail hearing. I quietly sat in the back of the massive courtroom and coldly watched as my wife and her lover were led in wearing federal orange jumpsuits and heavy handcuffs. Victoria's exhausted eyes found mine across the packed courtroom. And for a fleeting moment, we just deeply looked at each other. I analytically saw deep regret there, and genuine fear, and something that absolutely might have been love. But I also cleanly saw structural acceptance, the absolute recognition that this was exactly how our story ended. The federal judge brutally set bail at $5 million each. Victoria's wealthy parents were sitting there looking completely shell-shocked and deeply ashamed. They heavily posted her massive bail, but Preston remained strictly in federal custody. Apparently, Genevieve had been extremely thorough in completely freezing all his offshore assets. Outside on the marble courthouse steps, Victoria's elite father approached me. "Vance, I want you to explicitly know how deeply sorry we are about absolutely all this." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. Victoria made some terrible choices, but she's absolutely still our daughter. I entirely understand. Will you be actively filing for divorce?" I handed him the heavy envelope containing the weaponized divorce papers. "Yes." He nodded sadly. "I structurally suppose that's absolutely for the best." Victoria abruptly appeared at the marble courthouse steps, closely flanked by her wealthy parents and a high-profile criminal attorney I instantly recognized from television. She looked deeply in my exact direction, but I was already walking cleanly away. I had structural work to do, a legacy to rebuild, and for the exact first time in agonizing months, I was completely looking forward to both. 6 months later, I was finalizing a massive commercial acquisition for the Patterson Group when my secure phone rang. "Genevieve Blake. Vance, have you been actively following the federal trial?" "Some of it." I'd been entirely avoiding the massive news coverage, but it was incredibly hard to legally escape completely in an exclusive enclave where absolutely everyone knew everyone else's high society business. The federal jury came exactly back this morning. Preston got 15 years in federal prison. Victoria got 3 years and 5 years of strict federal probation. I deliberately set down my pen and sat back in my leather chair. How's she structurally taking it? About exactly as well as you'd legally expect. Her criminal lawyer aggressively says she'll file an appeal, but the digital evidence was utterly overwhelming. What about the elite law firm? Carmichael and Sterling is completely finished. They're aggressively facing massive civil lawsuits from a dozen wealthy clients whose offshore money was entirely stolen. Judge Carmichael is abruptly retiring early. The massive federal scandal entirely destroyed her elite reputation. I deeply thought about Victoria's powerful mentor, the ruthless woman who'd been exactly like a mother to her professionally. Another absolute casualty of conscious choices that had logically seemed so perfectly reasonable 6 agonizing months ago. "Genevieve, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you ever analytically wonder if we tactically went too far?" She was entirely quiet for a long moment. "Do you sometimes late at night when I'm totally alone in the massive house? I logically wonder if there was another alternative way. There definitely was. They could have simply told us the absolute truth from the very beginning. They could have legally asked for clean divorces instead of heavily embezzling and constantly lying. I know, but still, Vance, they actively made their conscious choices. We simply just strategically made sure those choices had absolute structural consequences. After I securely hung up, I completely signed the Patterson Group contracts and drove my Defender home through the crisp spring afternoon. My massive penthouse felt entirely different now, quieter, but absolutely not empty. I'd totally redecorated, actively gotten rid of all the expensive designer furniture Victoria had stubbornly insisted on, cleanly replaced it with masculine things I actually deeply liked. The weaponized divorce had been finalized 2 entire months ago. Victoria had desperately tried to fight it legally, but her massive criminal conviction made absolutely any financial claims legally impossible. I'd cleanly kept the massive penthouse, the development firm, and what liquid money we had left in our audited joint accounts. I'd also solidly kept something else, the absolute knowledge that I was structurally stronger than I'd ever thought, much smarter than elite people gave me credit for, and fully capable of analytically playing a very long game when tactically necessary. My secure phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Dinner tonight. I'm making handmade truffle pasta. Elena and I had been casually seeing each other since the federal trial officially ended. Nothing heavily serious, nothing overly complicated, just two independent people who actively enjoyed each other's solid company and had definitively learned not to ever take absolute trust for granted. I texted right back, I'll bring the expensive wine. As I pulled into my private garage, I immediately saw a familiar vehicle parked directly across the private street. Victoria's silver Range Rover, which her wealthy parents had apparently securely kept in climate-controlled storage while she was dealing with her trial. Victoria was quietly sitting on my grand front steps, wearing simple jeans and a plain sweater. She looked significantly older, much thinner, and incredibly exhausted. The ordeal had completely stripped away the polished corporate veneer she'd worn like impenetrable armor for so many agonizing years. Hello, Vance. Victoria, I recently heard you were officially sentenced yesterday. Delayed surrender, good behavior pending appeal, whatever. I'm out temporarily. I calmly sat down right beside her on the marble steps, maintaining extremely careful structural distance. How are you? Barely alive, completely broke, totally unemployed, permanently disbarred. She barely managed a very weak smile. Other than absolutely that, fantastic. What will you structurally do now? I absolutely don't know. My wealthy parents are grudgingly letting me stay with them while I try to figure things completely out. Maybe I'll quietly teach or work for a low-profile nonprofit. Absolutely something that doesn't require a legal license. We sat in dead silence for a few long minutes, quietly watching the late afternoon sun beautifully filter directly through the massive windows that lined our private penthouse terrace. Our exclusive terrace. I mentally correct myself that this was entirely my private terrace now. Vance, I urgently need to say absolutely something. Okay, I'm deeply sorry. Not exactly just for the dirty affair or the massive stealing or the constant lying. I'm deeply sorry for explicitly making you structurally feel like you weren't enough. You were absolutely always enough. I was the one who absolutely wasn't. Victoria, let me completely finish, please. She slowly turned to entirely face me, and I finally saw genuine tears in her exhausted eyes. You were a very good, solid husband. You totally supported my elite career. You meticulously took care of our massive home. You deeply loved me even when I absolutely didn't deserve it. And I threw it all completely away because I was incredibly selfish and stupid and totally convinced I legally deserved much more than exactly what we structurally had. You definitely did deserve more. Just absolutely not the exact way you structurally went about illegally getting it. I legally deserved absolute honesty from you, from my own self. Instead, I consciously chose massive lies and total betrayal and federal theft. She slowly wiped her tired eyes with the back of her trembling hand. I entirely destroyed absolutely everything good in my elite life because I was far too arrogantly proud to legally admit I was incredibly unhappy. Why were you incredibly unhappy? Victoria was entirely quiet for a very long time because I arrogantly thought absolute happiness was exactly something that naturally happened to other elite people, massive successful people, highly important people. I completely didn't structurally understand that I actually already cleanly had it. And now I explicitly understand a lot of complex things too late, but I structurally understand them. I deeply studied her exhausted face, actively looking for any remaining traces of the ambitious woman I'd married 15 years ago. She was absolutely still there entirely underneath the massive exhaustion and deep regret and hard-won wisdom. What do you absolutely want from me, Victoria? Absolutely nothing. I simply just wanted to formally apologize and explicitly tell you that you were absolutely right about exactly what? About absolute consequences, about conscious choices, about absolutely everything. She slowly stood up, carefully brushing off her plain jeans. I should leave. I simply just wanted you to explicitly know that I finally understand now. Exactly what I structurally did to us, exactly what I completely did to my own self. Victoria, wait. She slowly turned back. For what it's strictly worth, I completely forgive you. Her remaining composure finally broke entirely, and she started uncontrollably crying. Deep, heavy, wrenching sobs that genuinely seemed to come from somewhere she'd rigidly kept entirely locked away for agonizing months. I completely don't legally deserve any forgiveness. Maybe you absolutely don't, but I'm freely giving it to you anyway. Why? I analytically thought about the deep question about absolutely everything we'd been completely through, about the long chain of conscious choices that had structurally led us directly to this exact moment, because bitterly holding on to massive anger was actively destroying my foundation too. And I'm entirely done being structurally destroyed by exactly what happened between us. Victoria nodded slowly, still heavily crying. Thank you. You're completely welcome. She slowly walked to her designer SUV, then paused with her trembling hand on the silver door handle. Vance, are you truly happy now? I analytically looked at my massive penthouse, my defender, my quiet, private view of the exclusive Denver skyline. I thought about Elena's handmade truffle pasta, about the Patterson Group's deep gratitude for my brilliant commercial acquisition, about the solid satisfaction of actively building a strong empire instead of entirely tearing it down. Yeah, I finally said. I think I structurally am. Victoria managed a weak smile, the exact first genuine smile I'd seen from her since long before the dirty affair. Good. You completely deserve to be highly happy. She slowly drove away, and I quietly sat on my grand front steps for a while longer, peacefully watching the sun set over the strong legacy I'd completely rebuilt from the total wreckage of my high society marriage. Tomorrow I'd go back to work acquiring elite properties and taking care of my own legacy. I'd have dinner with Elena, maybe catch a private screening, definitely sleep extremely well in my own king bed, in my own penthouse. I'd definitively learned something incredibly important over the past 6 chaotic months. Revenge wasn't about permanently destroying your arrogant enemies. It was exactly about structurally refusing to let them permanently destroy you, and sometimes, if you were very incredibly lucky and incredibly patient, it was exactly about watching them completely destroy themselves while you methodically built an empire from exactly what they'd entirely left behind. I stood completely up, brushed off my designer slacks, and went inside the penthouse to prepare for dinner. I had vintage wine to buy, a woman to see, and a limitless future to enjoy. The developer had liquidated everything after